Okay, welcome to the most recent local giving webinar for Wales groups. We're going to be specifically looking at case studies that show how groups across Wales are fundraising online. I've broken them down into a few categories so you can see different ways that they're fundraising online, and we'll also touch on how some of them are fundraising during coronavirus as well. Just before I start off, I just want to set the context of what I mean by online fundraising and how people can go about it. So when I'm giving the examples, you know what I'm referring to. So online fundraising refers to any donations that are made through the internet. And I'm really going to be focusing on how those different organisations have done it. So that will initially include a main donation page. So every organisation that signs up to local giving will have a donation page that sums up their work as a whole, that talks about what their organisation mainly does, how funding could help, what are the outcomes of their work as well. This is an example on the right of one of those donation pages. It enables individuals to be able to donate one-off donations or to be able to give monthly donations as well in the form of direct debits. So when I'm referring to main donation pages, this is what I mean. The other page that a lot of organisations focus on are appeal pages. The main difference with these is that they are a temporary page and they enable organisations to really focus on a specific element that they need to raise funds for. That includes having a specific target, for example, towards a particular project or an equipment need or just to survive for the next 6 months. And an appeal page really focuses their fundraising efforts. It builds a sense of urgency. And lots of organisations run appeal pages throughout the year to vary how they're asking for support. The third type of page that my case studies refer to is a fundraiser page. And the main difference with that is that anyone can make a fundraiser page. The other pages, it's up to you as an organisation to make them, but fundraiser pages can really be made by anyone. So they could be individuals that are involved with your services, or they could be their friends and family, or any random member of the public that wants to take on a challenge, set themselves a target, and fundraise against that target for your organisations. So they are the different sorts of case studies that we're going to be covering today. Okay, so we're going to be looking, like I said, at 3 different sections of case studies. They are going to be organisations raising through main donation pages, organisations raising through appeal pages, and organisations raising through fundraising through fundraiser pages. So if we start off with case studies of how to succeed at fundraising through your main donation page, there's 4 in each section that I'd like us to look at today. The first case study is Pembrokeshire Weightlifting. So this organisation is a West Wales organisation. They make physical activity accessible. So they really encourage though people in wheelchairs or those with disabilities to be able to get active and get fit, and they fundraise in order to support that work to happen. So they've been with Local Giving for a couple of years now. They've really smashed it on the fundraising front and have raised over 21 grand. And what's been particularly interesting is that they've also really focused on using the online fundraising to access grants. So by that, I mean that they have been able to evidence to grant makers that their online fundraising shows that they, have a real connection with the community, that the local people really care about their work happening. And not only that, but they've already raised a portion of the funds themselves to make that happen. And through working closely with their grants fundraising, their online fundraising has really helped them to access additional income pots there as well. I also really like how they promote their work. They very much encourage coaches, volunteers, members, parents to all promote the work to really reach the wider community as well. So I just wanted to include that example to show how grants can also work alongside your online fundraising. This is an organisation that I might have talked to some of you about before, the Bridge Mentoring Plus scheme. So with this organisation, they were really unsure about asking individuals for support before. They had never had individuals donate to them before starting off, and they were really uncomfortable about asking people for money. So that meant that when they began their online fundraising journey, they very much needed support. But within their first month of asking for support, they'd raised over £1,100 from 50 donors, and instantly that's their confidence that they, it's really worth asking. And, if you don't ask, you don't get. They really learned that lesson and wish they'd started fundraising earlier. From that point, with their increased confidence, all of the staff got behind the effort. They all had training. They all divided up responsibilities. And they really fundraised through existing events as well. So they often did, various community coffee mornings and things like that. And they started to encourage people, to give a voluntary donation of £2, and that there'd be a volunteer at the back of the room to help them donate that online through their local giving page, if they wish to do so. So that's a really good example of making fundraising work through your existing work as well, and how it really pays off to actually be asking for that support. The Shared Earth Trust. So the Shared Earth Trust is a nature reserve in West Wales. They had tried crowdfunding before. They began their relationship with Localgiving, and they really wanted to make it work better for them and access unrestricted funds. They were really keen to access the training that Localgiving could give, because they just hadn't been able to make it work for them beforehand. They've now raised close to £12,000 through Localgiving, and they've really done very well on the direct debit front as well, having regular support. They've now got to the point where through the online fundraising, they are covering all of the running costs for their reserve. And they did that in, well, one really simple way in particular has worked for them, and that has been emailing. So they've really got their trustees on board, and had prepped them with the perfect email template to be able to share with the organisations they worked for, with their friends, with their family, and to have them prepped for the start of a particular date where they were really encouraging support, and 50% of those emails resulted in donations. So they've really done a lot to communicate people in that way, and email is a really important form of marketing to help organizations be able to reach people as well. And they also do Facebook and Twitter promotion. They've done appeals along the way as well, either for specific equipment or most recently a COVID-19 focused appeal where they've said that they're not getting any income because nobody's able to visit the farm, and that they've needed to raise additional money for their running costs, and keep the online fundraising going to support them during this time. So they did really well through that appeal as well. We've seen a whole range of COVID-19 appeals through Localgiving, a whole mixture that are either to help work survive or help work continue during this time, or to help organisations thrive and come back stronger as well. Cardiff Food Bank is one example of an organisation that has really done very well on the fundraising front during coronavirus as well. Localgiving is their primary donation method anyway. In 3 years, they've raised close to £160,000 through Localgiving, and they've really promoted it through their general marketing, through their social media, and through email as well. They've really been drumming up support in the lead up to this time anyway, and throughout this time for direct debit donations in particular, really giving solid examples of what a monthly amount equates to, such as this is what it costs to feed a family of 4 each month. And then direct debits can really make it feel very tangible when people are giving that sort of support. They've got to the point now where their online fundraising covers all of their core costs for staff, and they've been able to grow their staff costs as a result of knowing that those initial staff costs were covered. Since March, they've raised £85,000, and that's because they've done really well at their messaging of saying how vital their service is, how they really have more people to help than usual, in terms of there are more people who are financially stretched, more people who are facing food poverty at this time, and they've communicated that in such a way that it's been really clear that their help is really valuable there as well. They've just started supporting exploring fundraisers for the first time. That's not a route they've gone down before, but they have a couple of individuals who are seeking to raise smaller amounts for them towards that as well. Okay, so now I want to look at appeals in Wales and how those previous organizations have really raised money through their main donation page, but the following organizations we're looking at, it's specifically their appeals that they've been focusing on and raising money for something very specific and how they've communicated that. So this is Resolving Miners Welfare. They run a scheme where they are trying to save and revamp their local miners' welfare building near Neath. They have raised just over £2,000 already, and before engaging in local giving, they'd been dormant for 5 years, so they were really starting from a place of not having fundraised for a long time. As most of you will know, with miners' institutes and welfares, there is a culture that originally they were paid for out of miners' wages. So an amount would be taken on a monthly basis out of miners' wages to go straight towards their local welfare or institute. As such, there was a real concern from the charity that people would feel like they were paying for the building twice because they'd already paid for the building out of their wages originally, and now they were asking them to pay for the revamp to refit it for purpose. However, they've been really pleased that that hasn't been a barrier at all. People have really valued that they want to get the building ready for a new generation, and then obviously there is a new generation since those mining years as well who are keen to invest in the building too. They've really communicated very well that they want it to be a community space to help with social isolation, and they also want it to help the local economy as well. And so they did an appeal to save the welfare, which essentially revamped part of the space so that they could hold some shows and have a bar and things like that, whilst they slowly do up the rest of the building and get it ready for community purposes as well. They've also done really well on the direct debit front alongside their appeal, and encourage people to support them on a monthly basis, as they always used to as well. This is an organisation that, again, has done some really interesting appeals, including during coronavirus. So ACE, they are really good example of a community centre. They really do everything that community organisations should, and they're based in an area that is really disadvantaged and underfunded, and they really work to show that the potential that's in that community and to nurture local people's skills. And they've very much got local people involved in the organisation. All their roles are mainly filled by local people, and they've got a lot of people involved with volunteering as well. They really seek to improve things for their neighbours helping neighbours. They started off by running an appeal for a defibrillator for the centre. Within a week, they had that funding for the defibrillator, so they were absolutely thrilled. And they've gone on to raise over £6,000 in just 1 year as well, just under a year even. They have also done appeals towards smaller costs, such as helping young people access their school proms financially, and also a fuel poverty appeal to support people who need help with heating and everything else as well. They've recently launched and are running a COVID-19 appeal. It's a real community appeal. It's really needed during coronavirus, and they focused on raising money for food parcels locally to provide urgent help, such as collecting prescriptions. And then they're also running multiple helplines. One is a financial crisis helpline, and the other is a mental health support helpline. So they've really looked at what their community needs, and then they've provided that, and they've made sure they're providing it in the best possible way in the current limited situation as well. They've also done what we hope all organisations go on to do, which is that when they've tried fundraising in a very risk-free way through local giving, they've then seen the benefit of fundraising, and they've invested in that fundraising for the longer term. So they've done that by investing in a part-time salaried post. So they've got someone there to run the online fundraising and plan and manage a strategy for the online fundraising. And it's always the best outcome for causes when either they've invested in staff to invest in their own long-term future, because the more you invest in fundraising, the higher figures you'll be able to raise. Or some organisations might begin to have voluntary fundraising groups who are a group of individuals who are really targeted on raising money, and the organisation can see it's well worth them making something like that happen. This is a North Wales organisation, and I wanted to include them because they're a really good example of fundraising through the Welsh language, and they've predominantly done that through an appeal as well. So they're a theatre company, and they do tours of Welsh language live theatre. They take live theatre to different communities across the country. And they needed to fundraise entirely bilingually. So they wrote out their entire donation page in Welsh. And as you'll be able to see in previous webinars, it is possible to change parts of your donation page to Welsh on Local Giving. Very briefly, it's there's a Welsh flag at the bottom of your donation page, and if you click that, it changes all of Local Giving's bits, such as our donate buttons, into Welsh, so that someone can go through the entire donation process in Welsh. So this organisation fully took advantage of that. The whole page is really accessible then to people who are first language Welsh, and they've raised well over £5,000. The majority of that was an appeal to help them have their first home. So they don't have a base, and they really wanted a premises to help them to grow and to help them to produce more theatre. So they really reached out to new donors and community support who would really value having more theatre brought to their communities or their schools as well. And with that in mind, they also encourage local schools to do dress down days as fundraisers so that they could have more Welsh theatre brought to them as in assemblies and things like that as well. This is an organisation that I've talked about before, an organisation based in Swansea with the longest name ever, but they essentially they're volunteers that keep 3 parks in Swansea going, and they wanted to do an appeal to raise money for a new wildflower garden in one of them. All of the volunteers were over 70. They weren't comfortable with online marketing, so they were happy to make the online donation appeal, but they weren't comfortable with promoting it online. And so we worked with them to promote their work through traditional methods. They reached donors they didn't know existed, and they raised a lot of money offline as well. They received a lot of checks through the post and things like that too, because of the demographic they were reaching through their traditional marketing. And those marketing methods included things such as putting flyers in the bags in their plant shop, or approaching employers who worked near the park, whose employees might want to come and enjoy the garden on their lunch break. Or they also worked with the local hospital, whose patients might want to come into the gardens. They put like banners up and posters up in the park, and they approached their local councillor to be included in his newsletter. And they did things like free local press as well. So traditional methods like that can work really well. And, they were absolutely thrilled to, raise over £4,000 in a few months as well. And they'd never done anything like that before. So that's just a really good example of, however you feel comfortable, it is possible to make appeals work for you. And then I want to look at fundraisers and how organisations in Wales have really made fundraisers work for them to build their income online. So the first organisation I want to look at is Circus Eruption. This is an inclusive circus group, and they've recently secured their first premises. So they've taken over a derelict church that they're very much still keeping for community use, but they're able to revamp some of the space for their circus work as well. Obviously, the height of the rooms and things like that really lends itself to, high up circus tricks and things like that. So when I visited them, I visited the space as well. In its very early days, lots of spiders and things at that point, but it's got lots of potential as well. They really wanted to communicate to people that investing in this space and, raising money through their main donation page and appeals and fundraisers all really helped them to get the space ready. And it's also going to allow them to expand from working with 150 people a year to 1,000 people a year within the next 3 years. So it's well worth it, and well worth the investment, which they've communicated really well. They've also found that online fundraising has helped them to engage the families and friends of their members as well for the first time, and in that sense spreading their reach and spreading their network of support. And they found that online fundraising has made their ask seem very professional and streamlined and simple as well. And they've just done some really good fundraisers. So 2 volunteers who were quite young people, and they were doing a challenge that they came up with themselves, where they took a juggling ball, they based themselves on a famous local steep hill, And then they push that juggling ball all the way up the hill with their noses properly, bent in the dirt, kneeling in the dirt, all the way up the hill whilst all the members cheered. And, fundraisers like that, not only, do they vary what's going on, they're just fun and they engage people, and it makes it fun to fundraise for the members as well. So things like that can work really well when you're looking at fundraisers for your organisation. And if you can get the members to come up with their own ideas, then all the better as well. They're more invested in them then. This is a North Wales group, FTWW. They really address health inequalities for women in Wales, and particularly raise awareness of endometritis. They have raised, close to £5,000 already through local giving. And they do fundraisers that both raise awareness and raise income at the same time. They wanted to do a Snowdon-based challenge, as that was local to them, but they didn't just want to climb Snowdon. They wanted to do something that even local people would appreciate was a real challenge. So they did a week-long test of their fitness, really, and every day they walked a different path up Snowdon. So really challenging, really tiring, really physically, difficult as well. And they wanted to use that fundraiser to raise awareness and really represent the mountains that their members have to climb each day because of the conditions that they're living with. They exceeded their target. They had a really strong social media presence. So they kind of kept a log of each walk they were doing. They were adding photos along the way. They had conversations on all their walks because they all had branded tops. They were talking about what they were fundraising for along the way. And then they used that raising awareness and that fundraising to fund awareness raising resources and the cost of them going to conferences and things like that as well. So something like that, it can really use the challenges that are on your doorstep and also, really link it into your main work of raising awareness as well. The other fundraising example I wanted to talk about is Carers Trust Wales, because they've not only have they had fundraisers in the normal way, but they've also had a corporate do fundraising for them. So by that, I mean that they've got a charity partnership with a business, and that business then is aiming to raise £2,000 for them over 2 years through all the small fundraisers that their staff are doing anyway. So, for example, things like cake sales or dress down days or Christmas jumper days, every small bit of fundraising they do goes into that fundraiser page, adds up across the 2 years. And it's just, corporate fundraising is something that's really worth looking into for your online fundraising. If you manage to partner with, a business of 50 employees, and each of those employees, gives £10 across a year, that's not much for them, but it soon adds up for you as well if you have a few partnerships like that. They've also had individuals from the firm also do their own fundraisers. They've had the kind of group fundraiser the business is doing together, and they've had standalone fundraisers that individuals are running for them as well. They also have a youth council, which is a group of their young carers, and they encourage that group to take ownership of their own fundraising as well and run their own campaigns and fundraisers to get the income they need for the things that they're choosing to do that cost money. So in that sense, it can work really well if you're encouraging people to take ownership of what they're doing, and similar to some of the previous examples, you're really encouraging them to invest in their own fundraising because they're designing it themselves as well. Two more examples that I've talked about previously as well. So the Paul Popham Fund, they and the Recovery Can Read, they both just do things that I think are really easy to replicate. So Paul Popham Fund encourages people to do 12 challenges over 12 months. They predominantly work with children, and they encourage the parents of the children they work with to get involved with fundraising. Out of the 12 challenges over 12 months, they always do one of them at least together. And that is typically a cycle ride from Swansea to Paris. And in that sense, there's freedom in terms of what people want to take on and fundraise, but it is also a real challenge over 12 months. And, people are really able to build substantial funds over that time as well. Recovery Cymru, they just had the really good idea of, they worked out that it cost £300 to give someone a day of help when they really needed it. They then approached everyone that went through their services and said, did you know it costs £300 to help you when you're at crisis point? Would you like to give this day of help to someone else when they really need it? And they then had all these fundraisers with £300 as their target, really personal stories of what the group meant to them and how their services helped. And then all of those fundraisers exceeded their targets as well. And it was just really tangible that the exact amount they were fundraising was paying for one other person to get help as well. So in that sense, it's really worth thinking about your services, thinking about what is a good fundraiser amount to recommend, rather than the fundraiser picking a random target out of their head. If you can say this amount equates to this, or this amount equates to this, then they can really choose to highlight that on their fundraiser page, and it gives them further justification for asking for support. They're not just doing a swimming challenge, they're also doing a swimming challenge, but primarily they're helping someone else to be able to access a really valuable service. And so it's really how you communicate different things like that and help people strengthen their fundraisers that can really help them along there as well. Okay, brilliant. So we've looked at examples of how organisations in Wales have fundraised through their main donation pages, through appeals and through fundraisers. And hopefully that can make you see that each of those aspects are really worth you looking at, and that they really do work for such a range of causes, different sizes, different locations across Wales as well. I do want to look at some other areas for you to be able to get further help and inspiration as well. So some of you may have seen in my recent newsletter that we've launched a new online fundraising guidebook. This is a Wales-specific guidebook that I've been working on for some time, that is a really useful resource because it covers every aspect of online fundraising, every aspect that I've ever covered in training and webinars, but in a really broken down, readable, tangible way. Each section can operate as a standalone section, or if you want to do the entire guidebook, that's fine as well. So, for example, it is very much tailored towards people who've not done online fundraising at all and want to work through the guidebook from start to finish. But it's also really tailored to people who just want to really improve one particular area of the online fundraising. So, for example, there's a whole section on creating an online fundraising strategy. And so it's worth looking at the sections that really appeal to you. It's very much set up that there's a section of advice followed by a task that's relevant. And so in that sense, you can really have solidified what it is that you want to do in that area for your organisation. To access this guidebook, so on this Wales training section, this link here, and I'll send this through along with a recording of the webinar after this, then there is a resources section in that, and then there's a link to help you download the guidebooks. Now, I say guidebooks because there's also Welsh versions of the guidebooks. So I've also created a guidebook that's entirely in the Welsh language. So if someone is more comfortable working their way through the text and the tasks in the Welsh language, then that's absolutely fine, and that's there too. With both languages, there are two versions of the guidebook. One is an interactive version, which allows you to download it on your computer, to fill it in on your computer, so filling in a PDF really, and completing the tasks on your computer. The other version is a print version, which allows you to print off a hard copy of the guidebook and fill out the task by hand if you prefer, or print out certain sections that are of interest to you. So all of those resources are available for free on the Local Giving website. The link is there. I have also recently created a UK-wide version of the guidebook, which we're launching next week as part of Small Charity Week. I would really recommend you have a look at Small Charity Week. Just give it a Google. There are all sorts of online workshops and things like that happening next week to help small charities across the UK and beyond, with every area really of charity help, not just fundraising. And although Local Giving itself is doing a workshop as well on fundraising day on Thursday next week. So yep, have a Google of that because there's lots of resources available next week too. As many of you are aware, you can also search for organisations on Local Giving. There are filters you can put on there to look at organisations in Wales or particular areas of organisations. You can see what appeals that, or fundraisers people are up to there as well. And there is a YouTube channel full of tutorials. So if you want to learn more about a particular I've looked at, like how to run strong appeals or how to begin an online fundraising strategy, there are further tutorials available there. The Wales webinars have the word Wales in their title, so it's nice and easy to pick them out from the UK-wide videos there as well. So I will take questions in a minute as well in the chat section, but if you'd like to discuss anything in more detail or at any time, feel free to just get in touch using the contact details here. I will be sending the slides through to all Wales members, and I will be sending them through to all attendees to this webinar as well. Historically, we've been able to offer 350 free memberships to organisations across Wales. Currently, that offer is ended because all the places are full, but there is an ongoing offer for Wales organisations as well, and full details at the link there. There are likely to be future offers that come up as well. So any questions that you have, please do get in touch, and I will be around for questions now too. Thank you very much for tuning into the webinar.